Every private gun owner, one piece of advice, what would it be?
For the most part, if you've grown up in the South or in the
Yeah.
Midwest where gun ownership is just a part of life, the shooters that struggle the most are on the range are the students that show up and say the words, well, I've been around guns my whole life.
Over the last 14, almost 15 years, what was the most rewarding aspect of serving as a law enforcement officer?
Man, I would have to say...
Hi there. This is the point of the podcast where I'd like to thank our amazing sponsor, but we don't have one yet. If you're a business owner and you're interested in sponsoring the Green Country Conversations podcast and getting your business information out to hundreds of listeners across the Green Country area, please reach out to me. My email is maverick@bisonridgeinsurance.com. Let's avoid this awkwardness next time.
Today's guest is Ben Noble, a Claremore native and a lifelong resident of Green Country. After serving in law enforcement for 14 years, Ben transitioned to focus on training private gun owners on as a firearm instructor. Married for 16 years with 3 children, Ben is also an ordained minister, a musician, and the staff AV director at his church. His dedication to community, safety, and faith makes him a great, remarkable guest for us to have on today. We look forward to hearing his story. Ben, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Definitely, man. Well, I'm excited to kind of get to hear your, we've known each other obviously through you singing at our church and those type of things. And I think you're going to bring some cool stories and aspects to the podcast that we haven't had on yet. So I'm super excited for that. But to get started, I always like to start out with some icebreaker, silly questions. So if you could eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be? Now, I know you're a big guy, so I'm expecting something good for you here because I'm a big guy myself. So.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Probably a chicken fried deer steak.
Yeah.
Backstrap preferably, but it doesn't have to be.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
With mashed potatoes, white gravy, corn on the cob, and fried squash.
Awesome, dude. I mean, anytime you have meat and potatoes in a meal, I mean, that's a win-win for me.
Yeah, that's what built this right here.
Exactly. Me too, man. If you could eliminate one chore forever, what would it be?
Oh, wow. One chore. I would have to say dishes.
Me too. I hate dishes.
Simple.
It's funny how we like to eat, but we don't like the dishes, right?
Well, because we dirty them pretty good.
Yeah, I can put a hurting on some dishes, that's for sure. Okay, if you could give every private gun owner one piece of advice, what would it be? So if we were able to broadcast Ben Noble to every single person who owns a gun in America, obviously that's a lot of people, what would your one piece of advice be to them?
I mean, that simply put would just be train.
Train.
You can buy the nicest equipment you can find, the most user-friendly equipment that you can find, and you can set yourself up equipment-wise, absolutely perfectly. And if you don't train the fundamentals, you're going to be absolutely worthless with it.
Right. So
that's it. Training, but not particularly. If you don't know how to self-diagnose and you don't know how to fix your own problems, professional training, not just running out to the local range and popping rounds off, but good professional training.
Yeah. So I had a question that I was going to ask next, but I feel like maybe I already know the answer. So is that what you would say training, or maybe the lack of training, would that be the most common mistake you see private gun owners make? They just buy a gun, they put it in their safe, and they never train with it. Would that be the most common mistake, or is there something else?
No, I think that's probably it. And I mean, it mainly has to do with a mindset that for the most part, if you've grown up in the South or in the Midwest where gun ownership is just a part of life, there's and I put out a short video about this a while back, but there's just a common thought process that is, I grew up in a household where there were guns, and therefore through the process of osmosis, I know how to use them.
Yeah.
I've mentioned this before in like I said, in a couple videos and on the range, certainly I want to say this as nicely as possible because everybody's got to start somewhere.
For sure.
I certainly, whenever I started shooting, was terrible at it, just like everybody else. I know very, very few natural talents when it comes to shooting, but the shooters that struggled the most on the range, and this spans private citizens to law enforcement, everybody. The shooters that struggle the most are on the range are the students that show up and say the words, "Well, I've been around guns my whole life.
Right.
I've been hunting my whole life. My dad was all about guns. I have a ton of guns." It's the people who never mention how many hours on the range they've had,
Yeah.
or how many classes that they've taken, or that sort of thing. It's the people who never mention those facts that end up being my highest struggles in class. Good people, great
Yeah.
people. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with these people. They've just been fed a line their entire lives that is, we're a 2A family, or we're a southern household, or we live in Oklahoma, or we live in Texas, or
Right.
whatever that is, and guns are just a way of life here, so we just naturally know what we're doing. And the fact is, particularly when it comes to handguns, it's just not true.
Yeah,
It's not
right.
true.
The assumption that the amount of guns that you own equals your skill level is a bad assumption, right?
The amount of guns you own and the amount of money you spend on them.
Yeah, right.
They don't. That doesn't translate to skill.
Exactly. So obviously, we kind of mentioned it in our intro. 14 years as a enforcement officer. How has that background in law enforcement shaped your training methods of your private clients?
Well, I've been a law enforcement instructor since 2012. So
Okay.
not my entire career. I would say about 2 to 3 years into my career. I'm coming up on 15 years, but about 14 and a half years in now. And not the entire career, but a lot of it I've spent training cops. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you, I love my law enforcement brothers and sisters. I truly do. But we exist in a mindset that we are it. And we're the man, and we have the answer to all the problems. We have the answer to all the issues, and in a lot of cases, it's true. But that mindset makes law enforcement particularly difficult to train,
Right.
because in order to accept training, you've got to first admit and accept that I don't know everything.
Right. Exactly.
I don't have all the answers, and I don't. I actually have something that I've got to fix here. I'm deficient in some way.
Yeah.
And that's hard for cops to admit. And when you can push through that, and I feel like my time training cops has made it easier for me to train private citizens, because I've learned to almost like I think I've never really worked in sales, except I sold cars for a summer, and I hated that job. But, I never really worked in sales, but I know that one of the big tenets of sales is you've got to learn how to push through a no.
Yeah.
You've got to learn how to push through a maybe, or a let's talk tomorrow. Basically, you've got to learn how to push through people's unwillingness to accept what they need.
For sure.
And I think being able to do that with some of the most stubborn people in the world, and that's guys who wear a badge and carry a gun, has helped me to be able to translate that to private citizens who are either stubborn because of their background, or they're just stubborn because of anxiety, and they're anxious about the fact that now I have a lethal weapon in my hands, and I've got to learn how to use it. And that's helped me kind of navigate through those hurdles.
That's great, man. I think that being able to take what you learned in a sense of obviously the technical training, but also like working with those type of people and being able to put it towards your private clients is going to be really impactful for them. So think back, you said 14 and a half, almost 15 years you started law enforcement. Think back, what was your what made you pursue law enforcement? What was your initial experience like? Talk about those early years in law enforcement.
Yeah, oddly enough, I really didn't pursue a career in law enforcement. I went to college originally, which I didn't finish college. It wasn't my thing, but I originally went to college to be a teacher. I wanted to do that, and oddly enough, it's kind of translated now.
I was going to say, look at that, full circle.
I teach cops. It's which is probably not as hard as teaching kids and teenagers, but it's still got its challenges. But I was a welder. I worked for a small local welding shop in my hometown. Which you mentioned, I'm not. Small correction. You mentioned earlier that I'm a Claremore native. I'm actually an Oologah
native. Okay.
I just live in Claremore now, so I gotta, for my Oologah people.
Yeah, I got you. You got to keep it right.
I love my Oologah people.
Yeah, right.
But what was the point I was trying to get to there? Where was I
You
at? I lost my train of
you
thought.
worked at a small welding shop. We were talking about how you
Yeah,
got involved in
worked
law
at a
enforcement.
small welding shop in the Ulaga area, and it was like small family owned business, and it was about 2008 or so, and I had just gotten married, and of course we all know what happened in 2008. Everything, the floor just fell out from underneath everybody,
Yeah.
and I'm a low man, so I didn't last there, right?
First one to get trimmed.
Right, first one to get trimmed, which really kind of before my leaving was kind of right before that, but the writing was on the wall, and
Yeah, for
and
sure.
a friend of mine who was he's still a good friend of mine. He was the police chief at Tulsa Public Schools campus police.
Okay.
And at the time, Tulsa Public Schools, I'll try not to draw this out too
You're
much,
good.
but at the time, TPS contracted with a private security company called Securitas, which is still pretty prevalent there in Tulsa, to do their security in the schools. And he walked up to me one day and he said, "Listen, you're not going to like it. This is not a job you're going to want to do forever, but
Yeah.
you need a paycheck. Here's
Right.
here's a business card. Give these people a call." In fact, what he told me was, he said, "Call these people. They'll hire anybody with two legs and a pulse." So,
It's always a good sign.
and I think, honestly, I think he was pretty spot on, because I showed up a couple of days later to apply, and
Yeah.
I filled out an application, and about 10 minutes later, I was interviewed, and about 10 minutes after that, I got uniforms. So
That's crazy.
it was wild.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I did the security in the schools under this private security company for, I want to say, about a year or two, and then the campus police ended up forming their own security division within the police department to
Okay.
kind of not totally transition away from Securitas, but transition
Yeah.
away from it a little bit. Ended up getting hired there again with my friend who ran the police department, and I worked there for about 9 months as a security officer, and then they bumped me up and sent me to CLEAT, which is the State Police Academy, and worked for about another year as a campus police officer before I left and went to Collinsville, Oklahoma. But yeah, I mean, it was I never really sought out a career in law enforcement.
Right.
Now, where that changed was working as a security officer and getting to work closely with police officers and seeing what they dealt with, and seeing the kind of difference they made, the things they went after, their statutory abilities and powers and so on, just kind of getting an idea of really what a law enforcement career looked like, and it being
Right.
like, that actually looks pretty great. Like,
Kind of a cool way to get your feet wet and see what
yeah,
what's
yeah.
like.
I
Yeah.
just kind of figured it out slowly but surely, but it became something that I got pretty interested in, and like I said, it stuck. So
That's awesome. Over the last 14, almost 15 years, what was the most rewarding aspect of serving as a law enforcement officer?
man, I would have to say very recently. I mean, I recently made a transition to work for the state, but before that, I was working for the sheriff's office in Wagner County. And for the last, for most of my time at the sheriff's office, I worked in investigations. I spent a small time as a patrol supervisor and then went back to investigations. But the last 8-ish months that I was there, I was the dedicated domestic violence and sexual assault investigator. So
Wow.
any domestic violence cases or any sex crimes at all came to me.
Yeah.
And that included adults, it included children, it was a pretty wide array. And while most people don't find those cases very attractive or appealing, they don't really want to work those kind of cases.
Yeah.
For me, there were definitely difficult times.
Right.
There were cases that stick with you. There are cases that I still bother me today. But people, when I tell them I did that, people are like, "Man, I don't know how you do that job." And
Yeah.
pretty simply put, I did that job because, man, you can pull people over and write tickets all you want. I mean, that was never fulfilling. Working, going out and then taking burglary reports or theft reports, it was never fulfilling. But whenever I got to send a child molester to prison,
Yeah.
game changer, dude.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Right.
that was, when I worked homicides, and I worked all kinds of child abuse cases, and domestic violence is a wildly bigger problem than most people think.
Right.
It can be a whole different level of evil that I don't think people really understand. So being able to take a person and usually a woman and then usually with children out of a situation where they are essentially just doomed for life,
Yeah.
and being able to take them out of that and help them solve that problem. It was only about 8 months, but that was easily, without question, the most rewarding 8 months of my career.
That's amazing because you're making such a big impact. I mean, obviously, everything you do as a law enforcement officer makes an impact to some extent, right? But like you're saying, writing a speeding ticket versus, literally saving someone's life out of a
Yeah,
situation that could have been dooming to them. You're like, this is a big deal. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I want to transition kind of to the business ownership side of things. What has inspired you from transitioning from the law enforcement world into the training of private business gun owners?
Well, so I'm still in the law enforcement world.
Right.
That's still my full-time job, and Lord willing, maybe this becomes a full-time job down the line. That's what
Right.
I'm working towards. But like I said, I've been training cops for a long time in pretty much everything from your basic administrative duties to, less lethal weaponry like taser and baton and pepper ball and things like that for a long time. I had been trying to I've been a firearms guy, a shooter, a guns enthusiast for a long, long time,
Yeah.
and had always tried to get into a firearms instructor school. And it's not nearly as easy as you'd think it'd be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most agencies don't really want to send people to unless you work for a really large agency, but even then they're expensive trainings to go to. They require thousands of rounds of ammunition, which is even more expensive on top of the
Right. Yeah.
cost of the
Yeah.
class. So I mean, I had put in for firearms instructor schools amongst a few different agencies, man, probably 5 or 6 times, and never got to go.
Yeah.
Just because either the agency didn't want to pay for it, or we're understaffed and I can't be gone for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever
Right.
that is. And I finally got to go last year, which was December of 23. I went through the FLETC Academy. That's the Federal Law Enforcement Training Commission, I believe is.
That's awesome.
And I finally got through the FLETC Firearms Instructors Training Program. It was awesome, and I told my wife when I went through, like, this is something that I want to do for work. I want to train my partners and my new cops. I want to do that, but man, there is such an incredible need within just the community for people to know how to defend themselves.
Right.
I'm a big constitutionalist, which a lot of people, or not a lot of people, some people will bark at and say, well, how can you be a police officer and also a constitutionalist?
Yeah.
And that's probably a long conversation for another time. But I'm a big time constitutionalist. And when I see people have the ability to exercise a right to defend themselves,
Right.
but not to take full advantage or even partial advantage of that ability. And again, the fact that you have a gun in your house, that doesn't mean you're taking advantage of your ability to defend yourself.
Right.
I saw a pretty huge deficiency there that's been there for a really long time. And I said, I think we have an opportunity here to remedy that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, of course, nobody starts a business purely for the idealistic side of
Right.
helping. There's a side that says I want to make a living, and
Yeah.
there's a side that says I want to do a little bit better for my family, and I want to add some possible opportunities to my
Right.
family. So,
sure.
but the opportunity to not only do something that I love to do, which is shoot,
Yeah.
and to do another thing I love to do, which is to train and teach people,
Right.
and to do them together, and also make a little bit of money on the way.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's not a bad thing.
It's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, when you get to do something that it's not just a job, but it's something that you actually enjoy and look forward to doing, and also make a little money at it. I mean,
Right. That's always
easy.
a good thing. That's amazing. That's amazing. So I like to kind of get into the weeds of the business in a sense of, I tell everyone, obviously at Bison Ridge, like I started a business, but I really just like the game of business. Insurance is kind of the game that I decided to play, the vehicle I use to run a business. But I just love businesses. Like that's what gets me going in the morning. Like I'm like, I like that. So what has been the biggest challenge you have faced with starting a business?
Honestly, I don't want to. Man, I don't know that I've faced any real heavy challenges. I mean, of
Yeah,
course, what I love for the first year for this to have replaced my salary and I can just work for
yeah,
myself. Yeah, but that's reaching for the stars, man. I feel like I've been incredibly blessed with the fact that my goal for 2024 was to teach 50 people.
yeah.
And I felt like that was an attainable goal. I feel like I can do that. We trained somewhere in the area of 125, 130 in
That's
2024.
amazing. That makes me so happy.
Yeah, I mean it blew me away. I didn't make any money,
Right.
because I spent
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
spent I spent money building the business and advertising the business
Right.
and buying equipment and that, which is fine. Like
Hmm.
that's totally cool with me.
Yeah.
If there was really, so I say all that to say I don't want to be ungrateful for
Right.
the chance that I have gotten, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that have trusted me that didn't have to.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, they were happy that they did. But if I can nail it down to any challenge, they would be pretty small challenges, and that's just kind of the challenge of getting people to realize that not only that they need it,
Hmm.
that what I'm providing is something they need,
Right.
but to realize that they're gonna have to invest in it just a little bit.
Right. Exactly.
So then that's everything from just paying the initial money to even be there, which
Hmm.
I've given away. I can't tell you how many free classes in this first year,
Yeah.
really in the name of getting people in the door,
Right. Exactly.
and tons of discounted classes. I can say with absolute confidence that I gave away more free classes and discounted classes than I did classes that people paid full price for.
Right. Right. Right.
100%, and I think it's
Right.
not even close. But buying it, man, guns are expensive,
Hmm.
and holsters, good quality holsters, are expensive,
Yeah.
and weapon lights and optics are expensive, and ammo is freaking expensive, and
Yeah. Exactly.
and it's like it's hard again when people work with that, when people work with a mindset of I'm fine and I don't really need this,
Yeah.
because that's kind of what's been ingrained in their entire lives. That if you're around guns and you go hunting a couple times a year, that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Then to tell them, hey, I need you to spend $200
Yeah.
plus a $25 range fee. Come out to the range and spend 8 hours of your time.
Right.
By the way, you're going to have to buy a couple $100s worth of ammunition.
Hmm.
And you don't have a holster, so that's going to be another 70 or 80 bucks.
Yeah.
And so that's been probably the biggest challenge, is to get people to understand that this is an investment in your ability to defend yourself.
Right.
If you plan to carry a weapon in public outside your home at
Hmm.
all,
Yeah.
I cannot overstate enough how important a quality holster is.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
The whole notion of that you see in the movies of stick that Beretta in your belt in the
Yeah.
back of your pants, and you can you can run, you can jump, you can
Yeah.
fight, and it'll never go anywhere. That's not reality.
Hmm.
And convincing people that when you do carry for self-defense, that you don't want to use the $10 Winchester white box full metal jacket ammunition for target practice. You need to go buy the
Right.
stuff that costs about $1.50 a round.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's been really I
The
might
biggest
even say
challenge.
the only challenge
Right.
is just getting people to understand that in order to do this right, it's going to take an investment, and
Yeah.
and a lot of people have jumped on board with that, and I do my best to explain the why
Hmm.
that's necessary. A lot of people have jumped on board in that, and some not quite yet. I think they will
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah.
But it's a process, and everybody's at a different place in that
Yeah, I
process.
know. I think that hearing you say that there's not been a lot of challenges instantly goes to my mind. It's one because this is something that's needed. This is a business that's endorsed, obviously by God. Like He's given you the ability to teach this stuff that's needed for other people, right? And I think that because it's a passion of yours, even if there are like if I went in and tried to run your business, there would be challenges for me because it's not a passion for me, right? For you, it's a passion. So like you saying, I've given away or discounted more classes than, I've sold full price. It's because of the fact that this is a passion for you,
Yeah.
right? And it's more than just work. And I think that your passion and your drive for the business is going to help make that mind shift, right? The mind shift that you're talking about where people are like, hey, this is something I truly need. So my next
Absolutely.
question is kind of off the mind shift thing. Let's say those people, those 150 or 250, 125 people you've trained, you break through that mind shift with them. You get them to change their mind on that stuff. What's been the most rewarding part, or if there's maybe one story you can tell where someone went from, hey, I'm scared to even touch a handgun to now I feel fully trained. Do you have something like that you can kind of share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I've got anybody that I've gotten all the way to the point where they
Right.
are 100% confident.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'd say confident, but our first year we did mostly handgun basics classes. That was the majority of our classes. We did some rifle classes and we did some higher level handgun classes, but the majority of our classes were handgun basics classes. And in those classes, I can think of probably a dozen just off the top of my head right now that came into those classes saying, I've never shot a gun.
Yeah.
Or I have shot a gun and I hated it.
Hmm.
It was uncomfortable for me. It scared me. I don't want to do it. My husband's making me come to this.
Yeah.
I'm being totally transparent, and it's not a dig of any kind
No. Yeah.
as
For
to
sure.
why, but it's usually ladies.
Hmm.
Because I think, and again, this thing can bleed off into a dozen different long side conversations, but traditionally husbands and men take the role of the protector of the home, the
Yeah. For
protector of
sure.
the kids, and I think that's right.
Me too.
I think that's the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
I think women are absolutely capable of protecting themselves and
For
their
sure.
children. But I think traditionally the husband will generally take that role. And I think that's correct. I think that's the way it should be. But leads itself or lends itself to kind of making it to where women get the short end of the stick as far as actually developing those abilities.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of ladies that come in and say, well, my husband bought me a gun. Now he says I need to train with it. So here I am.
Yeah.
And it's hard to push through that. The fear is the biggest one.
Right.
And I think there's a million different avenues that comes from, whether it's the media or it's social media or whatever that is that kind of demonizes firearms as this inherently bad thing, this
Hmm.
thing that will hurt you.
Right.
Just a gun exists and therefore it will hurt you, or therefore it'll hurt someone else. Pushing through that, even for people that are Second Amendment enthusiasts, they agree with
Right.
the Second Amendment, but they just don't have the experience. Man, you put something in someone's hand that creates a loud boom, and they also get some kinesthetic movements out of it. They
Yeah.
have to learn how to manage that recoil. They have to
Right.
learn how to not be scared of the fact that things jumping a little bit. It's a challenge, but I'll say, with the exception of maybe one, every last one of those people has come through, and we take things. One of the things I say when I send a welcome email out to a new student is. Black Lab Operations is about tailoring our training to the student.
Hmm.
And even though I'm teaching a class, I'm teaching whatever it is, 5, 10, 12, even up to, I think we had a 16 or 18 person class. Even though I'm teaching several people, I'm going to push you at the speed that is going to help you
Right.
advance.
Right.
I can't expect 18 people to all progress at the same speed.
Exactly.
And the other part of that is, like I said, we tailor training to the student, and then we apply just the right amount of pressure to get that student to progress.
That's good.
And that's what it's going to require. Like
Right.
if I put the gun in your hands and I say, okay, this is how you grip it, this is how you press the trigger to the rear, and this is how you manage recoil, and you do it once, you can say you did it once. But you're never going to progress to the point where you're actually accurate, or you can do it at speed unless I turn that knob just a little bit.
Yeah.
And we kind of let people know that you're going to feel a little bit of pressure.
Right.
I'm never going to yell at you. I'm never going to talk down to you. I'm probably going to tell you, okay, that was better. Now turn it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And what we find is most people, almost all people, will accept that challenge.
Right.
Like I said, there's been maybe one that I can think of in the last year who kind of was basically just looked at me and was like, no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, no problem.
Yeah. Right.
If you leave here today doing things safely and doing things at your very, very slow and very intentional speed, but you leave here today no longer scared of that firearm, that's a success.
Yeah. That's
And
awesome, man.
we'll do it again. We'll take the
Yeah.
class again, and we'll get there eventually. So
That's awesome.
it's pushing through just the basic lack of experience and a little bit of fear of the unknown has probably been the biggest challenge.
That's amazing. I think that you being able to push people a little bit is always a good thing, right? Because I think, like you said, being able to say, "Oh, I've done it one time," is cool and all. Like, but being able to push it to where you're able to do it full speed when you don't have an instructor behind you is what you're trying to get to, right? And so I think that's really important. So let's say this, one of my listeners is listening here and they're like, "Man, I want to reach out to Ben and start up some training classes." What does the typical run through of training look like? What is your, do you have a set kind of rubric that you follow on every single training? What are you kind of trying to, is there an ultimate goal at the end of the training that you're trying to hit a checkpoint for that class? What does your normal training sessions look like?
Well, that's pretty class dependent. I would say again, the majority of our classes being handgun basics classes right now so far, like I said, we're starting pretty much from the ground up.
Yeah.
So my goal for those classes, for those students, is to be able to function the firearm safely. I made the mistake very early with my first few classes, and there's a couple of my students who absolutely called me out for it, and rightly so. I mean,
Yeah.
it helped me a ton whenever I asked for feedback, and they gave it to me, and it was a huge help. But I pushed those classes too hard.
Right.
And that was that was nothing but inexperience and a little bit of, again, I'm used to training cops.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a different speed.
I'm used to training guys that essentially can't say no to pressure.
Yeah.
Like we kind of have to do a little bit of baptism by fire with these people. So
Right.
with my first few classes, I made the mistake of being a little bit too ambitious, being being a little bit too, not necessarily rigid, but I wanted them to get to a point that maybe they weren't ready to get to.
Right.
And I almost didn't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
Just kind of said, "Hey, you'll be fine," And that was sorry, let me get a drink.
You're good, man.
That was a huge mistake on my part. Just taking people again with no experience and expecting them to really perform. So I made a pretty big change in my classes after those first few where you're gonna end up where you're gonna end up. Right. Particularly in the basics classes. Now, when you start coming to the more advanced level classes, there's an expectation that, okay, you've got the basics now and you can safely handle the firearm, you can efficiently handle the firearm, and you have some measure of accuracy. Now we're going to heat it up a little bit.
Right.
I do have a kind of a standard class schedule for every class that I do. Like here are the checkpoints.
Yeah.
Here are the top. In the first hour, these are the things I'm doing. Second hour, these are the things I'm doing. I have yet to have a single class that follows that schedule perfectly.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's just the nature of the beast when you're training 10 people who are all at different levels.
Right.
But generally, the classes tend to follow the slowest person.
That's awesome.
Just so I can be certain that I'm checking all the boxes and I'm not leaving anybody behind.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I do have somewhat of a schedule that I follow. But kind of going back to what I said earlier, the whole the whole premise behind our training is that I'm not going to expect you to perform a certain way at the beginning of class. I'm going to evaluate you, and then we're going to see where we need to go. And so everybody's going to end where they're going to end. And I tell people, I've got several people I've told, like, hey, I want to keep seeing you, but you're not ready for the next level.
Right.
Let's do this class again.
Yeah.
Or let's meet up privately. I do private training as well. If I've got some people that are not necessarily comfortable in a classroom, not classroom, but a group setting, that I train privately, and that helps people quite a bit because it's more one-on-one. I'm seeing more with one person than I have to see with 10 or 8 or whatever. But people end up where they're going to end up. Again, with our basics classes, the biggest purpose of the basics classes is safety and basic proficiency.
That's awesome.
If I can get those two things, then I can move you on to the next level.
That's good. That's good. So let's say, someone's listening and they're kind of on the fence about, firearm training. They're on the fence on, I think I need it, I think I don't need it. And there are just some misconceptions they may have. What are some misconceptions that maybe you can think of that maybe holding them back that you'd like to clear up from? Maybe one major one that you're like, hey, if I could get this one thing across to you about firearm training, this is what it would be.
Yeah. I mean, if you ever are asking the question that, do I need it? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
And that goes for everyone from the basic foundational, I've never shot before, I have very little experience, all the way up to the guy who's he runs on a SWAT team, or he's a sniper, or every single person who runs a gun needs to train on it.
Right.
This is a I hesitate to call it arrogance, because I don't think that's really, I don't think that's really the purpose of, or really I don't think that's really what's behind people's kind of unwillingness to put time into their training. It's just that mindset of it's not necessary. Mm-hmm. Well, if guys who run guns for a living require themselves to train weekly, monthly, bi-yearly, or biannually, then why are we any different?
Right.
As a private citizen, or maybe not as each person specifically, but private citizens are more likely to have to use their weapon in self-defense than law enforcement is.
Right.
In general, you come into contact with more people, right? Mm-hmm. You are in those gas stations, you are in those grocery stores, you're moving all over the world. Again, maybe not on a person-to-person basis,
right?
But you're going to have more shootings or more self-defense situations that happen within society involving private citizen on private citizen than you are law enforcement on private citizen. Right. It's just the way it works. Okay. Because there's just more
numbers wise, right?
Numbers wise. There's more of us.
Yeah.
So, but again, cops are required and they are not required to train nearly enough.
Yeah.
But they're required to qualify every year. They're required to go to a range and shoot a qualification course every year. Again, that's nowhere near enough.
Right.
But it's something.
Right.
So if you're going to carry, now if you're not going to carry a weapon, then that's fine. That's your choice. Yeah. I think it's a mistake. Mm-hmm. I think it's a little bit of a lack of foresight. But if you're not going to carry a weapon, that's fine. If you are going to carry a weapon in public or even on your own property and you're around anyone, you need training.
Yeah.
I mean, you're accountable for every round that leaves that barrel.
Right. Exactly.
And if you're spraying rounds all over the place when you've got a threat in front of you, I mean, consider who's behind your target. Consider what's behind your target. I mean, even worst case scenario, you take out a window of a house. Somebody's going to pay for that.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I mean, and that's like
minor.
The lowest risk you can possibly think of.
Right.
And we don't need to get into detail about what the real risk is, but
right.
It's the most common thing is the idea of people just asking that question. Is it really necessary that I train? And the answer is yes. Yeah. It's always yes. It's never no. Yeah. I mean, This is like, we're both men of faith. We're both men of the church. And it's like asking, do I ever really need to pray? The
Right.
answer is
Exactly.
always yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
100% of the time. So now, does that mean that you need to spend $1,000 or $10,000 a year on training?
Right.
Not necessarily. I would love
Yeah.
for you to. Please, if
Right.
you want to do that, call me. Like
Yeah.
we'll figure it out.
Yeah. We'll figure something out.
Yeah, but this is one of the easiest decisions you'll ever have to make. I mean, the answer is literally never no.
Yeah.
There's literally no downside to training ever.
That's awesome. I mean, that's great. That's great insight. So now we're going to get into our green country questions. We ask these two questions to every podcast guest. This kind of brings us back home to the whole mindset of we're all citizens of green country. And I would like to hear kind of what your ideal day looks like in green country. What are you doing? Are you going to the range with the kids, hanging out? What are you doing on your perfect day?
I'm a homebody. I'm a pretty big homebody. My wife is not. So her answer
It always works that way, right?
Yeah, her answer would be very, very different from mine. My idea of a perfect day is, it's pretty sunny out right now. It's kind of cold, which I like the cold. But
Me too.
my idea of the perfect day is we're all at the house, we're hanging out, we cook some good food. Maybe we go out to the back, we shoot a little bit, we burn some in the fire pit, hang out around the fire, cook something over the fire. Basically, spend all day with no stress.
Right.
Spend all day with no real plans. Maybe have some people over, have some friends over, family or whatever. That's my ideal day. Now, I don't get that kind of day a lot because again, my wife likes to do things, and my kids are a lot like her. They like to go, they like to do things, and it's really honestly, it's a really good thing. And so, when we go out, man, we like to eat good food. We like to, I like to go to the movies. I love going to the movies. We like to do some, we haven't done a ton lately, but we always really like to go on little short hikes.
That's awesome.
When we lived in Ulaga, we'd go, which we're still fairly close to it, but we'd go to that. There's a nature trail off of Ulaga Lake.
That's awesome.
That you can go about a mile and a half. It's a short hike, but it's just, a little exercise, and it's fun to get out for fresh air. Like to go on hikes, we went to Robbers Cave State Park one time and took lunch and, that sort of thing. So like to do stuff where we're just out and about, moving around or going to the movies or something like that. But you never really know what my wife's going to want to do.
What she's going to cook up that day, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I can never really anticipate what she's going to do. But honestly, it's good for me, and we get out and have a lot of fun. But my dream day would be just here around the house, outside, play with the dogs.
That's amazing.
Eat some good food, and hers would be let's go out and do some
adventure.
Yeah,
that's awesome, man. It's always nice to have that counterbalance, right? Because my wife is the homebody. We could go home and sit on the couch and watch a movie and hang out with the kids, and I'm like, my sons are very much like me. Like, I mean, the very first question my son asks every day when he gets home from school is, "Where are we going today?"
Where are we going?
I'm like, brother, there's not always somewhere we're going. But then again, in my mind, I'm like, I wish there was somewhere we're going. Like, let's go find a basketball game to watch, or let's go do something. So I completely understand that. But my wife is very much like, hey, slow down. Like, let's spend some time, just being peaceful at the house. And it's nice to have that kind of balance. So if you could give our listeners one hidden gem in green country, what would it be? Maybe a restaurant, something that you've experienced, going to a nature trip, anything. I know that there's a lot of people who think that they know green country, but there's so many great experiences in our area that people haven't experienced. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Man, hidden gem in green country.
Maybe a restaurant up in your area. I know Ulugaw's a smaller town. Maybe there's a restaurant there. Something that people may not go off the hidden beaten trail.
Man, honestly, for me, again, we talked about guns this entire time. I love a good range day. Yeah. I love it. And you can even if it's just an hour or two, I mean, it almost ends up being a full body workout by the time you're done. There's a great range in Porter where we do some of our classes, a lot of our classes, but not all of them. It's called Glendale Grace Firearms in Porter. It's right off Highway 69, right by the Turnpike. just north of Muskogee. But man, they've got anything from I think they've got a 300-yard long range,
That's awesome.
long range rifle shooting, and they've got little small 25-yard pistol bays.
Right.
And you can do, I mean, you go out there, you take a short little safety briefing, and you just go out and have a good time.
That's awesome.
I love to shoot. Again, love to hike. It's the little nature trail there off Oologah Lake, Hawthorne Bluff, or actually it's called Skull Hollow Nature Trail, but it's right by Hawthorne Bluff. Great little place, mainly, especially if you got young kids. I mean, it gives them the chance to, it's not a super grueling hike. You know, you're not climbing cliffs or anything like that. It's a pretty mild walk, you know, but it's great for kids. They get to navigate the rocks and the trees, and they get to, almost the whole thing is wrapping around the edge of the lake, so they get to see the lake, and it's a fun deal, man. As far as food goes, my wife and I are absolute suckers for Chuy's in Tulsa.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, I love that place, and it's very Tex-Mex. It's not authentic at all, but God, it's so good. We go there any chance we get to just off the cuff go have dinner. We like to
go to Chuy's, huh? That's awesome.
We love it, dude.
Yeah, Chuy's they have the salsa bar that I love. I love being able to go up there and get all different kinds of salsa. That's awesome. Well, Ben, I appreciate the time, man. Give our listeners where they can get in touch with you. Tell them where they can find out about your classes. What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so we actually just launched our website a couple weeks ago, and it's still very much a work in progress. It's fairly simple right now, but you do have the ability to see what our classes are all about, see the cost for them, and so on, and then also register there and pay online and all that kind of stuff. It's it's at blacklaboperations.com. Fairly simple to remember. You can catch us on email. It's blacklabops. So instead of operations, just ops, OPS, blacklabops@gmail.com. You can also, we're on Facebook under Black Lab Operations. We're on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Facebook is where we have the most success. We reach the most people on Facebook, but we push them all. We work them all. We also I've done a bunch of training videos and review videos, and then just kind of conceptual type videos. And I post all those on YouTube, and I put them all. They're all attached on our website. So
awesome.
You have the ability to check all of those out. But mainly, man, the place that people get a hold of us the most is Facebook Messenger.
Awesome.
We get most messages there, but I check the email constantly. So anytime you email me, you're going to hear back from me pretty quick. Those would probably be the best options, but like I said, we check them all every day.
Awesome. Well, guys, if you are on the fence about private gun ownership training, anything in that name, get in contact with Ben. I know he'd love to even just give you more information about it. But Ben, I appreciate the time. And guys, if you haven't already, please subscribe. We'll be dropping an episode every week from here on out, every Tuesday. So we hope to see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.